I can still close my eyes and summon the smell of that afternoon. It was a mix of ozone, old paper, and the sharp, clean scent of cedarwood. We weren't supposed to be there. We were supposed to be down in the main hall of the conservatory, suffering through the final rehearsal for the graduation gala. But the storm had broken over the city with a violence that shook the windows, and in the chaos of a power outage, 12 of us had slipped away. Hold on just a moment before we continue. If this story is touching something in you, please take a second to like this video and subscribe. It genuinely makes a difference and helps me bring you more stories like this one. I also want to hear from you. Write in the comments, where are you right now? Are you tucked away in a peaceful village where stars fill the sky, or surrounded by the hum and glow of a city that never sleeps? We found refuge in the clock tower storage room, a dusty, forgotten jagged space high above the campus. It was a graveyard of broken instruments and velvet curtains, lit only by the gray, watery light filtering through the louvered shutters. When the heavy oak door thudded shut, it cut off the frantic noise of the world below. Suddenly, the only sound was the rhythmic hammering of rain against the slate roof and the collective sound of our breathing. That was when the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a decision anyone spoke aloud. It was a frequency we all suddenly tuned into. Elias was the first. He was leaning against a stack of covered timpani drums, his silhouette long and jagged in the dim light. He reached out to me. It wasn't a casual gesture. He extended his hand palm up, suspended in the air between us. A silent question. I remember looking at his hand. I saw the callus on his ring finger from years of playing the cello. I stepped forward and placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, not tight, not possessive, but absolute, like a lock clicking into place. A current seemed to run through the room, snapping the tension of the last 4 years. We were seniors. We were exhausted. We were 20, 2 years old and terrified of the precipice of adulthood. But in that room, the fear evaporated. Julian moved next. He had always been the stoic one, the one who held his emotions behind a wall of dry wit. But now, he stepped up behind me. I felt the warmth of his chest radiate against my back before he even touched me. He rested his chin on the top of my head. It was such a heavy, trusting weight. His arms wound around my waist, locking casually in front of me, effectively shielding me from the rest of the room, yet inviting them in. "We're safe here," he whispered. The vibration of his voice hummed against my spine. That was the signal. The dam broke. Whatever social contracts we had obeyed in the hallways, the unspoken rules about personal space and platonic boundaries, dissolved. We were just souls hungry for contact. Kale and Soren, the inseparable duo who usually spent their time arguing over philosophy, moved to my sides. Kale took my free hand, the one Elias wasn't holding, and lifted it. He didn't kiss the skin, he pressed his cheek against my palm, eyes closing, rubbing his face against my hand like a cat seeking comfort. I could feel the rough stubble of his jaw, the heat of his skin. Soren didn't touch me with his hands. He simply stepped close, toe, and leaned his forehead against my temple. He let out a long, shaky exhale, the kind that leaves your lungs burning. I leaned back into Julian, anchored by Elias and Kale, and let my head tilt toward Soren. For a long time, nobody moved. We just stood there, a tangled sculpture of 12 human beings, breathing in sync. Then, gently, we lowered ourselves to the floor. The old Persian rugs were dusty, but we didn't care. We collapsed into a heap of limbs and heavy denim and soft cotton. I ended up seated with my back against the wall, legs stretched out. Silas, the shy pianist with the nervous tremor, lay his head in my lap. He stared up at the ceiling, exposing his throat, a gesture of ultimate trust. I found my fingers drifting into his hair, carting through the dark curls, scratching lightly at his scalp. He let out a sound, half sigh, half sob, and his eyes fluttered shut. The others settled around us like spokes on a wheel. There was Dante, who traced the line of my shin with his thumb over and over, a mesmerizing rhythm. There was Leo, who sat shoulder to shoulder with me, his head resting heavily on my shoulder, his nose buried in the crook of my neck, just breathing me in. And there was utter silence, save for the storm. Then the confession started. Not the big, dramatic secrets of movies. These were the quiet, jagged shards of truth we carried every day. "I don't think I'm good enough," whispered Rise. He was lying on his stomach, chin resting on his crossed arms, looking up at me. "I got the fellowship, but I feel like a fraud. I feel like they're gonna find out I'm just a kid pretending." I reached out and brushed a thumb over his eyebrow. "You aren't pretending, Rez. You're becoming." "I don't want to go home," murmured Silas from my lap, his voice thick. "If I go back to the emptiness of that house, I think I'll disappear. I only feel real when I'm with you guys. Then we don't let you disappear. Julian said from where he was sprawled nearby. He reached over and gripped Silas's ankle. We are the anchor. Wherever we go, the line holds. We talked for hours as the light outside shifted from storm, gray to a bruised purple twilight. We spoke of fathers who never said I love you, and mothers who expected too much. We spoke of the terror of rent checks and the fear that our best days were ending right here, in this dust. And through it all, the physical affection never wavered. It was a language of its own. Leo shifted, lifting his head from my shoulder to look at me. His eyes were dark, dilated in the dim light. He leaned in, giving me plenty of time to pull away. I didn't. He pressed a kiss to the corner of my mouth. It wasn't hungry. It was grateful. It was a kiss that said, "Thank you for seeing me." Then he kissed my cheek, and then my forehead. It started a ripple effect. It was as if they needed to memorize me, and I needed to memorize them. Elias kissed the inside of my wrist, right over the pulse. Cale kissed the scars on my knuckles from that time I punched a wall in sophomore year. Dante leaned up and kissed the hollow of my throat, soft and fleeting as a moth's wing. There was nothing scandalous about it, though the world outside would have called it madness. 11 men and 1 woman, tangled together in the dark, touching, holding, kissing. But it wasn't about desire, or at least, not the cheap kind of desire that burns out. This was a desire for witness. We were witnessing each other's existence. I remember looking at Eris, the athlete of the group, usually so composed. He was sitting slightly apart, watching us. I extended a hand to him. He scooted forward and buried his face in the space between my neck and shoulder, his arms wrapping around my waist, holding on tight. I could feel dampness on my shirt. He was crying, silent and shaking. I held him tighter. We all did. Hands reached out from the circle to pat his back, to squeeze his shoulder. We absorbed his grief until he was steady again. By the time the rain stopped, the room was pitch black. The only light came from the faint glow of street lamps below, casting long, barred shadows across the floor. We were stiff. Our legs were asleep. My throat was dry. But none of us wanted to break the spell. "We have to go," Julian whispered eventually. "I know," I said, but I didn't move. One by one, we detangled ourselves. It was a slow, reluctant process, like tearing stitches. When we finally stood up, dusting off our clothes, the air felt different, thinner, colder. Before we opened the heavy oak door, Cal stopped us. "Wait," he said. He walked over to me, took my face in both of his large, warm hands, and looked me dead in the eye. "This is real," he said fiercely. "Everything out there. The jobs, the expectations, the noise. That's the illusion. This," he gestured between us, the invisible threads that connected all 12 of us. "This is what matters. Don't ever let anyone tell you this didn't happen." He kissed me then, hard and quick on the mouth, a seal on a promise. We walked out of the clock tower and down the spiraling stairs. As we descended, the noise of the campus began to rise up to meet us, shouts, laughter, the tuning of instruments. We stepped back into the lights, back into our roles. That was 10 years ago. The conservatory is renovated now. I hear they turned the clock tower into an administrative office. We are scattered across the globe. Elias is first chair in a symphony in Vienna. Julian is a corporate lawyer in Chicago. Silas teaches music to kindergartners in a small town I've never visited. We have wives, husbands, ex-partners, children, mortgages. We have gray hairs and worry lines. But I still have a group chat that never goes silent. And sometimes, when the rain hits my window just right, or when I smell cedarwood and old dust, I am back in that room. I remember the weight of Julian's chin on my head. I remember the salt of Eris's tears on my shoulder. I remember the way 11 men looked at me, not as a prize, not as a conquest, but as the center of gravity in a world that was spinning too fast. I remember the sanctuary we built with nothing but silence and touch. We walked out of that room, and we grew up. But we never really let go. In the quiet moments of my life, I can still feel their hands, warm, steady, and terrifyingly gentle, reminding me that I am seen, I am known, and I am loved, and that is enough to last a lifetime.